On a bright spring day in April, New Englanders Sylvanus and Julia Dodge welcomed Grenville Mellen Dodge into the world. He was a bright and industrious child. At 14 years old, while working on the nearby Landers family farm, he was inspired by the older, charismatic Frederick Landers to become a civil engineer and pursue a military education. Dodge enrolled in Norwich University in 1848, where he focused on math, grammar, logic, military science, and civil engineering. He graduated from Norwich University in 1851 and moved to Peru, Illinois, chasing the promise of employment and adventure. In the wild and opportunistic West, Dodge thrived. On November 23, 1853, he first laid eyes on Council Bluffs. Though it was just a small hamlet, Dodge saw a dynamic future, a gateway to possibility, and an essential role for himself within it. But Council Bluffs' potential was not the only thing occupying his thoughts. While in Peru, Illinois, Dodge had become acquainted with a beautiful, refined, and spirited young woman named Ruth Ann Brown. At 22 years old, he and Ruth Ann married. In August of 1859, Abraham Lincoln traveled to Council Bluffs. While in town, he sought someone to speak with about the Transcontinental Railroad. At 28 years old, Dodge sat down with Lincoln at the Pacific Hotel on its wide front porch, where they discussed ideas and logistics for 2 hours. At the end of the meeting, a bond had been formed and a shared vision born.
Not one, but many railroads will someday center here.
Dodge supported Lincoln's bid for president as part of Iowa's delegation and attended his inauguration in March 1861. One of the key Republican Party policies, plans for the Transcontinental Railroad. But just as the work was meant to begin in earnest, a country on the edge charged headlong into civil war. Not long after Arkansas and Tennessee seceded from the Union, Grenville Dodge was appointed colonel of the 4th Iowa Volunteer Infantry, fighting for the Union. On March 7th, at the Battle of Pea Ridge in Arkansas, Dodge's brigade faced a fierce and bloody battle against a superior Confederate force. They were outnumbered 3-1. As he would tell the story, 3 horses were shot out from under him in the course of the fighting. Ultimately, Dodge's brigade prevailed. The Battle of Pea Ridge became legendary. Dodge was promoted to brigadier general for heroism a few months before Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act into law. During the course of the war, Dodge also conducted a critical and effective espionage campaign, as well as organizing a black regiment, arming freed slaves, and recruiting several to spy on Confederates. In response, the South called for Dodge's immediate execution if captured. In November 1864, Dodge had an audience with President Lincoln in the White House. At this point in his life, Dodge had 2 primary goals: win the war and build the railroad. To this end, he and his soldiers waged war on Native Americans, offering those he captured as forced labor for his future employer, Union Pacific. In the summer of 1867, he established Cheyenne, Wyoming, and his team went on to travel across the West. They laid 487 miles of track in Black Hills and crossed Sherman's Summit at 8,212 feet, the highest point of any railroad on the planet. In the summer of 1868, Dodge was summoned to Laramie to meet with his boss, Vice President of the Union Pacific Railroad, Thomas C. Durant. Durant was a mercurial and corrupt boss. He had continuously altered Dodge's surveys in order to add more miles to the railway, cheating the government out of millions of dollars and jeopardizing the project as a whole. Durant planned to kick Dodge off the project to protect his money-making scheme. He entered the negotiation flanked by his allies, including the legendary General Ulysses S. Grant, who was also the Republican nominee for President of the United States. Also present were famed Civil War generals William Tecumseh Sherman and Philip Sheridan, as well as Major Generals Christopher Augur and Francis Preston Blair, the Democratic vice presidential candidate. Durant's coarse methods of intimidation were no match for the power and influence of Dodge's contingent. Dodge brought a cannon to a gunfight. Before the day was over, Dodge was given full authority on the routes for the Union Pacific Railroad. Finally, on May 10, 1869, after a furious, back-breaking effort, the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads were joined with golden spikes at Promontory Point. At 38 years old, Grenville Mellen Dodge stood proudly and surveyed what he considered the greatest achievement of his life. He had, in his mind, helped unite the country once again. To be a titan in the Gilded Age is to know privilege upon privilege. Dodge becomes the chief engineer for the Texas Pacific Railway, and the Dodges split time between Texas, their dream house in Iowa, and New York. He is often in the company of his friends Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, and Andrew Carnegie, and consults on railways around the world. He lives to see Council Bluffs grow into the thriving railway hub that Lincoln predicted it would be. And he watches the South maintain and institutionalize racial inequalities through Reconstruction. When Dodge returns to Council Bluffs permanently in 1907, he turns his attention to philanthropy, focusing on animal welfare and Civil War veterans. He is often seen walking to and from his office with a cat on his shoulder. When Grenville Mellen Dodge dies on January 3, 1916, he is mourned by his family, his community, the men with whom he served, and a country. Months later, Ruth Ann succumbs to her illness. A statue of a black angel stands as a reminder of her life and last moments. Ultimately, Dodge has surveyed or constructed 16 railroads in 6 countries, totaling over 63,000 miles of track. It is enough to circle the earth almost 3 times over. In Dodge's will, he provides for his fellow veterans and their children, as well as the disadvantaged in his beloved home of Council Bluffs. A titan in his time, the echoes of his impact continue today. He leaves behind a legacy that is both enduring and complicated, a tide in an ocean of time, much like the man himself.
Are you ready to enter a time capsule? Join us in these storied walls filled with historical significance and secrets. Perhaps you'll be drawn to Dodge's original books, or the curve of his favorite chair. Maybe it's the Civil War mementos or the railroads that capture your imagination. Or maybe it's all about the details. We invite you to explore this living history. We know you'll have many questions, and we can't wait to answer them. Welcome to the historic General Dodge House.
Red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag. But should should old acquaintance be, for God keep your eye on the grand old flag. You're a grand old flag, though you're torn to a rag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag. But should old acquaintance be, for God keep your eye